So
Yeah.
there you go. Mr. Fancy with his full-size Touch ID keyboard. And
There we go.
I don't know where I got this one from. This probably came with my original Mac Pro
Okay.
or something. Actually, now that I say that, I think I bought. I think my Mac Pro, my original Mac Pro, came with one of the acrylic keyboards with the white keys.
Oh,
You
one
know,
of those. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I've
Classic.
I've got that
They're
within
sought
arm's
after
reach.
now. It's funny. Back in the day, we were sort of getting rid of them, but now they're sought after, aren't they?
They're sought after, and I believe I purchased this one to replace that keyboard at some point. But
Yes.
so
Funny enough, I
now,
did the same. I had an unfortunate incident with the cat. And no, seriously, it did actually happen. It's really weird because yeah, she just came over, walked over the keys as she was wont to do sometimes, but her claw clipped one of the keys off, and I just could not get it back on again. She might have broken something, but it was interesting. I think Apple were interested in me sending the keyboard to them so that they could see what a cat damaged keyboard actually looked like. I had a real example.
I honestly thought you meant a different unfortunate accident with the cat in your keyboard.
No, luckily it was just a claw taking a key off. So yes, it could have been worse, I suppose, in a way. But I did have to buy a new keyboard because I just could not cope with it working again. It never worked the same after.
I we got a hello from Brian. Hey, Brian.
Excellent. Hi, Bri.
I'm always happy to see you in the chat room because that tells me that you're either ignoring work or you're not working. And if you're not working, that's good for you on a weekend.
Excellent. Well,
I'm
exactly.
teasing. I'm teasing.
Yeah, it's not natural to work on a Saturday and Sunday. That's definitely not. It's just not on. Not the done thing. It's not cricket.
Well, what are we doing? We're working. This is work. This is
Well,
work, Darren.
I don't count
No,
this
it's
as
not work.
work. No, this isn't work.
We can hardly classify this as work.
This is fun.
So, little pre-show thingy here. You got my email?
Yes. Luckily, yes.
I completely changed all the stories that I'm planning to talk about,
Excellent. Excellent.
with the exception of one, and that's the kind of follow-up to your lead story. So I thought I would just kind of, kick things off as we do a little intro, and then we will throw it over to you for the first story. I've got the follow-up story, which is really, it's really just some takeaways. Some takeaways from someone who dove into this topic and said, "Hey, let's see what we can make the Mac do." And then I've got what do I have here? I have two stories, if you will, and then one fun news story. So how many?
Is that the ones with the links that you sent in the email?
No, not a
Oh,
one.
no, excellent.
Not a one. That's what I mean. I completely changed everything.
Perfect.
It will be a
Well,
surprise.
in that case, what is the lead story?
It will. Well, your lead story is the same,
Is it? Okay, fair enough.
isn't it? Isn't it?
That's what I was checking. Is my lead story still the lead story? Is it actually a lead story? I'm not entirely sure whether it
Well, here,
was
I'm going
just
to
a
send it to you.
side thing or
I'm going to send it to
Okay.
you. Forget the misspellings. Okay, I just sent it to you. So in
in
Zoom
the chat. Let me turn on the chat
Yeah.
chat window. Oh, that, yes. Okay, no worries. Yes.
Right. So I thought that was your lead story.
Yeah, yeah. It's something I was just going to mention because it's important to the Mac community, I suppose, because it's been one of those things that's okay, let's go with that. Yeah, no worries.
And then you can bounce amongst your other stories if you would like to.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other ones were probably a bit more, well, some of them were anyway. There's Yeah, we have some very interesting things going on in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. And to be fair, it's going on here in the States as well,
It
but
seems,
only
yeah, indeed.
select states. It's not all of them. It's just certain
Yes,
states.
exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll get started. We'll get started, I
Cool.
guess,
Okay.
if you're ready. Unless you had anything to chat about. I know you missed Macstock, and you
Oh, yeah. It
specifically
did sound brilliant.
you specifically really missed Brian's talk. I remember there was some wailing and gnashing of teeth on your part that you missed his talk. I only say that because he's in the chat right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, Brian's talk was
I
really
can
good, by the way.
confirm.
Really good. Yeah. We'll need to make sure you get a copy of that so you can
Well,
watch
that
it
would be
because
fantastic.
yeah, it
Yeah,
was
yeah. Watch
good
some of
talk.
these offline because I think you guys have got recordings, haven't you, of some of the talks?
I
And
do.
I heard one of the shows that was recorded at Macstock. So that was the Mac Geek Gab
Mac
guys.
Geek Gab. Yeah, they're
Indeed.
yeah. Yep, Stump the Geek at Macstock. That's kind of become a
That's it.
tradition at Macstock. They
Yeah,
do that
traditional. Absolutely.
every year now. And then there was a
And
Mac
Alison
Voices.
asked about 11 questions.
Well, there was a Mac Voices live, also
Yeah.
recorded at Macstock, and I handed over 18 plus gig of files to Chuck just the other day so
Wow.
that he could get that released. So
Wow. There's a bit of compression to go on there, I suppose, and a bit of editing maybe. Yeah.
probably a bit of editing. Yeah, I didn't tell him, but I included a half hour of pre-Mac Voices live video recordings that showed us setting up the stage and all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
So
that's interesting as well. Behind the
yeah,
scenes. Yeah, yeah, I
behind
like that. Yeah. I'd be
behind
interested
the
to watch that.
scenes, yes,
Fabulous. Yeah,
behind
yeah.
the scenes.
It's like DVD extras.
Yeah, exactly. The most boring DVD extras ever. It's a half an hour of watching people set up a stage with
Yeah.
no audio. So
Oh, I'm sure it can be made exciting. Absolutely. Bit of an edit and a bit of a soundtrack over there.
maybe a little music overlay.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. A little bit of a speed up in sections. Yeah, yeah.
I believe there was one point during which Brian kind of was like staring in the camera, but didn't realize he was staring in the camera. So
Brilliant.
fun stuff. We keep picking on poor Brian. He's listening to all this,
Oh,
and
bless.
yeah, no, Brian is amazing. Okay, so let us get started, I guess, huh? Shall we?
Cool. Yeah, why not? What could go wrong?
Okay. What could go wrong? Absolutely zero. So I will get to the start of my notes here and we'll get going. Where are we? We are 54 into the audio recording. Okay. Ready? Ready. All right, here we go. Seriously. In 3, 2, 1. It's For Mac Guys Only, episode number 455 for July 26th, 2025. News on the Fringe. Hey everyone, welcome back to For Mac Guys Only, the show for the Mac community. The show for the Mac community, where we share our thoughts and opinions on current Mac news and events. And joining me to discuss those current Mac news and events, among a few other things, is Darren Davies. Howdy, hey Darren.
Hi there.
And remember, we normally record For Mac Guys Only live on YouTube the second and fourth Saturday of the month. And if you would like to come hang out, ask questions, and be part of our live studio audience, be sure to subscribe to the show at youtube.com/FMEOTV. And if you are joining us live on YouTube, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat, so if you have any questions or comments, be sure to drop them in there, and we will try to address them here on the show. Well, It has been a while since we took a look at the headlines, Darren, to see what's going on in the world of Mac. But rather than simply cover the same news as everyone else, for the most part, we like to look at news on the fringe, the things that don't get the same attention elsewhere. Well, actually, I guess they do get attention somewhere, or we wouldn't know about it. But when I proposed the idea to you and Eric, I believe your response, Darren, was that you liked the idea of a news and opinion show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it sounded like a really good idea.
And we will get to that news in just a moment, because we're going to wrap up today with a two-parter from listener Bruce, who shared some feedback on remote support episode, on that remote support episode, and also has a question about Wi-Fi in the home. And
oh, perfect.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one. It's something I've run into myself. And just to be different, I've got a bit of an oddball essential app that's not an app.
Excellent.
But let's take a look at what's been going on in the world of Mac, Darren, because I seem to recall that you sent a note the other week where you said something to the effect of, I've got something to talk about, even if it's not our main topic next episode, and that is a bit of gaming news. Well, one big surprise there. But this is kind of big news, isn't it?
That's true. Yes, exactly. So that's the reason I wanted to mention it, really, because it has connotations to the whole of the Mac community, really. I mean, not everyone is a gamer or does much in the way of gaming on the Mac. I mean, traditionally the Mac is a platform that we do lots of the other fun, cool things with computers, and we don't generally do much in the way of gaming, but that's sort of historical. But things changed rather dramatically the other day when a big AAA release was finally released for the Mac. It's in the PC world, it's a little bit older now, but it is still a really, really big example of actually a massive AAA game. So it coming native to the Mac does make a big difference. And it does show a lot of the naysayers that were particularly down on the Mac as a platform for doing anything to do with gaming. It shows them what is actually possible, and it's been a really good release. And I thought it'd be a good idea to just mention it because it's almost like Mac gaming is here now. It's official. It's actually real.
You mean Lemmings wasn't enough? I mean, that works for me.
Well, Lemmings is great, but that was native at one point, wasn't it? But I think
Load Runner. Runner? Come on.
Oh,
Castle
Load Runner, of course.
Wolfenstein?
Well, that's the thing. The Mac has always been a really, really good platform for emulation.
Yeah.
So if you are in the retro gaming type of mold, which I am as well, I prefer that in some ways. The Mac has always been fabulous for that. So that's never been a thing. But the PC users out there are definitely or definitely used to say that not only was the Mac a bad choice to as a platform to buy if you had anything to do with any gaming that you wanted to do, that not only that, but that they were actually saying a lot that the Mac was an incapable gaming platform itself. It was completely incapable of good AAA games, which is why there weren't any for the Mac. And that was entirely untrue. And now this release has actually shown that to be untrue. So it's good. It's actually proved the point now that Mac hardware is perfectly good for gaming. And also the software support, and especially what's coming up in macOS Tahoe is increasing what can be done in the gaming sphere as well. And we'll have very interesting, fun things with Metal 4 coming up in September.
Well, quick and important note here, Darren. Would you like to mention the name of the game?
Oh, I forgot to mention what it's called. Indeed, yes. The big title, the big one.
Yeah.
It's Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah.
So that is the big new game that's just been natively released for the Mac, and the big thing is now we know we were able to play the Windows version with a few tweaks and using tools like crossover and so on, but we now don't have to do the extensive translation layers like translating 8.6 code to ARM and also translating DirectX to Metal, or trying to. So we got no translation layers anymore. So now that it's running native, we can actually see what the true performance of the Mac hardware is, because it's native code running directly on the chips it's supposed to be running on without any translation layers. So it's really good to see from a technical point of view what's going on to actually run and host the game. So that's one of the big things that does now change the Mac gaming community as a whole, to say this is what's possible now. And it's a good note for other developers to see, oh yes, we can see what the platform's capable of and what's coming down the road for gaming support. So this is likely to lead on to more game releases and more importantly, more AAA support from developers, because it almost became, in fact, no, it's not almost, it did actually become number one in the charts for
in the
sales.
Mac App Store, you mean?
In the first day, not just in the Mac App Store, but in all the other stores it's available as well. So it's on the Mac gaming list. So not out of all games, but out of the games available for the Mac, it instantly went to number one pretty much. So it shows that there's sales there, there's sales potential.
We should probably point out this is really not the first, as you describe it, AAA game to be released for the Mac. There have been plenty throughout the years.
That's right. Yeah.
There just isn't any consistency, if you will. In other words, the large developers don't or didn't necessarily see the dollar signs when it came to putting resources into developing for the Mac as a platform.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that has potentially led to these development houses changing their mind are some of the things that have been happening behind the scenes, not only with Steam, and yes, games being able to easily be ported over to other platforms like Linux.
Like Linux, yeah, that's fed right into it. Yeah, absolutely.
That certainly fed into it, but then also, as you rightly pointed out, Apple's efforts to make it easier to port games over to the Mac.
Yeah.
And
Apple's been instrumental.
Do you happen to know? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but do you happen to know if the developers of Cyberpunk 2077 took advantage of these tools, or did they go off on their own direction, or how did they get to the point where they were able to release it for the Mac?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because that's what I was just about to say, which is great. That's
great
perfect.
Minds.
Perfect. Great minds think alike, indeed, yes. So, yeah, well, the first point is that the all the assets and all the shaders, I know the shaders have to be rethought about, recompiled and so on, and possibly reimagined in some ways. That's the big work, the shader work. But they do have all of the assets they've already developed for the Windows version of the game. They have all the textures, they have all the game assets, they have all the library, they've got example code, they've pretty much got already 80 to 90% of what you would need to create the game on the Mac. And it's just the last 10% that's always been the difficult bit. And a lot of developers have thought in the past that it's really hard to do that last 10%. As you say, Apple not only have developed some tools to help developers realize their games and even test to see how they run without doing a single line of code difference change in effort as a preview. They could also, Apple also offer help to developers to implement the last really difficult bits, which is like redoing the shaders and so on, and getting all the assets in and packaging things up in the way that Mac needs things packaged and so on. So yeah, the developers were really good in this case. They've worked extensively with Apple to re-engineer the core engine to run their game, and that's shown in the quality there. So that they've taken everything that Apple have given them for tools and so on, and also support. They do get support, but they've done a cracking job of implementing the game, and it runs really well. Although I have seen several bits of information online about people being disappointed with the performance, and I think they've missed the point in a way with some of these things. I mean, it is quite easy to get a good, fast working gaming experience on almost any Mac, and I was really surprised actually. It's supported on any Mac from the M1 upwards, so 16 gigs is required, but it does run on 8, but it's not a good idea to run it on 8 because you'll get quite a lot of jittering going on. So 16, you need 16 pretty much, and we all knew that going forward. I mean, that's the same on the Windows side. You need a lot of RAM to run these games. Exactly. So it's not a platform change, not a difference between the platforms in that way. You need a lot of RAM.
What?
But the surprise is that it was actually playable on the lowest end M1 upwards. So the entire range of M series Macs can actually play this game at a playable rate. Obviously, the older, slower M1s with 8 CPU cores aren't going to set the world on fire with a frames per second score, but at least it's in a playable state, and you can actually play it at 30 frames per second on the lowest M1 you could possibly get. And with the current Mac range, so that's say an M4 based Mac Mini with 10 cores, you only have to do two very minor tweaks, and you can get up to like 56 frames per second, and that's and that's with good responsive gameplay, no stutters, everything smooth as silk, and that's very nice indeed. Thank you very much.
If you don't mind, I'm going to tie into an article that I read about the game's release, and this was something that was over on Tech Radar. The title of the article was, "I played Cyberpunk 2077 on an $8,000 Mac Studio, and while it doesn't compete with my RTX 5090, Mac gaming is no longer a joke." And the key takeaway from this article, if you just want to, bring it all down to one point, and you mentioned frames per second a few moments ago, is you may not be achieving that 100 plus frames per second that you can achieve on a PC gaming platform. But the article author's point was, look, if I can get to 60 frames per second on a Mac, and you can argue that the Mac is not a gaming machine. Even this $8,000 Mac Studio is not really a gaming machine, right? That's not its intent.
It's not focused. That's right. It's not focused on gaming. Although there are many PC owners that call themselves gamers. They're actually gaming on a studio. Right. Not a Mac Studio, but they're gaming on a workstation level PC. So their PCs actually cost $6 grand. So we're not out of the we're not too far out of the bounds of comparing like with like. Although the RTX 5090 is very, very different to how the Mac's GPU cores are set up.
Well,
But I think
the point of the article, though, is not to criticize the Mac. So
no,
that's kind
it
of where
sounds fair. Yeah, yeah,
that's where I was going with this, is that
that's right.
he started out with this $8,000 Mac Studio, and as you read the article, he says that was probably a mistake. He probably shouldn't have started with that. But
No,
and let me clarify that even further. He probably shouldn't have started with that because, in the end, he was a little disappointed with the performance he got out of this $8,000 machine. Whereas if he had started with his other test bed, he would have been, you know, raving
yeah,
from the very start of the article about how well the game runs on
exactly.
the
Yeah,
Mac.
yeah,
Now, there were a few key takeaways from the article, and I wanted to quickly point these out. And the first one has to do with the purchase of the game. As you mentioned, this isn't a spring chicken in the gaming world. It was released, I believe, originally in 2020, right? So
yeah. So it's 4 or 5 years old. Yeah,
it's a 4 or 5 year old game. However, an interesting point that was made in the article is if you have already purchased this for the PC, you should
yes,
be able
it's
to
free.
install it on your Mac without having to buy it again. So if you
That's
purchased
right.
it through GOG, or you purchased it through Steam, or you purchased it through wherever, you're going to
Yeah,
automatically have the Mac edition and you can run it on your Mac. So that is a very important
yeah,
point to make. Because I think the base game is like $60, and then there's an ultimate version which is $80. You know,
that's right. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
a
So it
lot of
was quite
money to.
expensive back in the day. Yeah,
Well,
yeah. But it
that
covers, like you say, it covers all platforms. So if you already own it on Steam and you log into your Steam library, you find you already own the Mac version. So you've got some flexibility there. And that's great. So you can, that means without spending any money, you can directly test platforms against each other now
if you care to, but
with
I
one
think most
purchase.
people will just want to play the game, right?
Well, yeah,
So
absolutely.
most are not. They don't care about comparing platforms. They just want to play the game,
No,
and
I'm just a geek, but I do. But yeah, yeah,
and the point is that if you purchased it at any point in the past for a PC, you can play it on your Mac and not have to repurchase it. So don't go to the Mac
yeah,
App Store and plunk down $80 for it because
yeah,
you think you have to. Go to where you maybe have purchased it in the past. And I did check, and I
yeah.
did not purchase it at any point, so a little bummer there. But you know, check and see if you already own it, because then you likely, depending on the platform, have the ability to run it on your Mac at no additional charge. So
Absolutely. Yeah,
that
you
was
don't want
one
to buy it
point.
again.
Now, the platform that he tested this on initially was an Apple Mac Studio M3 Ultra with
Yeah,
32 core CPU, 80 core GPU, and
all the big one.
256. Let me get through my thoughts here, Darren.
Sorry.
80 core GPU and 256 gig of memory. That's a honking machine there.
It is.
So then that's what he started with. Now, interesting is that, and I think this is a really, really smart move on the developer's part, and I'm assuming they worked with Apple to make this work as smoothly as possible. But Cyberpunk 2077 offers a new graphics preset that is called For This Mac. And that, if you select that setting, should give you the best graphics and performance for the Mac or MacBook or Mac Mini that you are running the game on. I think that is an amazingly brilliant way to approach the issue of running it on a wide variety of Macs from the M1 up through the M4. I think that's great.
Yeah.
As he was playing around with this, though, also being a nerd like you, he said keeping most of the settings the same, he upped the resolution to 4K, turned on ray tracing to its highest settings, and path tracing.
Oh,
Unfortunately, though, that dropped the average frame rate from around 60 frames per second to 20 frames per second, which completely made the game unplayable.
yeah.
So his bottom line is, you know, getting an $8,000 PC or Mac to hit 60 frames per second might be disappointing, especially for PC gamers. But he also said that playing Cyberpunk 2077 on a PC with the RTX 5090 means that he's used to having all of the graphical settings at their very highest settings, along with the demanding path tracing feature, and still seeing 100 frames per second or higher. So
you
bottom
can
line,
get higher on the
bottom
Mac,
line
though.
on the Mac Studio is it's not a gaming machine, right? But now
It
that
can
we
be.
have Cyberpunk 2077 and it performs very solidly on the Mac Studio, means that the Mac Studio might be a workstation PC, but it's a workstation PC that can also play games with pretty
Yes.
good results.
Yes.
Now, the other takeaway here that I wanted to bring up is that I mentioned earlier he was disappointed with the Mac Studio, and that he probably shouldn't have started there. And as he points out in the article, that's because he set his expectations too high. You've got an $8,000 machine, your expectations are going to be through the roof that it's going to run spectacularly. And the resultant frames per second that he got as he enabled more and more features, and you can read the article and you'll see very, very nice charts in the article where he shows the frame rates or frames per second that he got based on various settings. It's a really well thought out and informative article if you're interested in that sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely want to be jumping into that one. But I think it sounds like he made one of the mistakes that a lot of testers have made in effectively using the settings not as optimally as they could do for the Mac, because they're used to tweaking their settings for an RTX card, which, by the way, cost many thousands in itself. But they don't think that the approach for giving you the best gaming experience and the best frames per second, it's actually a slightly different approach on the Mac. You don't approach it in the same way as you would on an RTX card. So there's a difference there in how you approach the settings. And I think a lot of people that do this testing, they've got their settings a little bit wrong.
Right, but stop apologizing for the Mac. I hear you keep defending the Mac, and that's not the point of this article. The point of the article is not to tear down the Mac. Not at all. The next point I was going to make that was made in his article is that, yes, his expectations were too high with the Mac Studio, but when he tested it on a MacBook Air with very, very low expectations, he was able to get 30 frames per second using the for this Mac setting. And with a little bit of tweaking, he pushed upwards of 70 frames per second. That's not bad for a $1,200 notebook computer. And even more so when you consider that the MacBook Air does not have active cooling. It has passive cooling. And so one of the concerns there is if you do push it too hard, you're going to melt your machine. No, you're not going to melt your machine. It's just going to throttle back and your performance is going to suffer. So the takeaway from this article to me is that it's a really, really nice rundown. Tons of explanation of the tweaks that he made to find the balance of performance to graphic fidelity, while also touching on things like that I believe might be a little unique to the Mac to a certain extent, like spatial audio and the benefits that it brings to gaming when you use the AirPods
and
Pro.
HDR support, of course, So, and that's the other thing. It's famously difficult to get HDR working on the PC side of things, but it's laugh out loud easy to get HDR, a good HDR result on many Macs, because it's all built in and already supporting HDR before you even click the icon. Whereas on the PC, there's a lot of things you have to do to make give you a good HDR result.
Yeah. So I think it's a fantastic article that everybody should read. I'm going to link to it in the show notes.
Cool.
Allow people to go through, the process that he went through to determine how to make Cyberpunk 2077 run just a little bit better on your Mac than it already does if you just use the for this Mac setting. So, it is big news. And I think as more developers adopt this type of technique of saying, or understanding that they are developing for a different platform that has different hardware capabilities that they need to truly adapt to that platform and include things like the for this Mac setting to give people the best experience possible as they play the game. So
That's right.
yeah, really, really good article.
It's early days. It's early days now. For instance, developers already do have to do that exact thing. Say, for instance, they're porting their game to the Nintendo Switch. That is a different approach in how the developer works to the strengths of what that platform can do. So so you get a good result then on the Nintendo Switch from a Windows AAA game because they've worked specifically to what that platform's strengths are. And it's the same approach for the Mac, although people are thinking that the Mac should equal an RTX card. The truth is, it doesn't yet. But the thing that people do forget, there's a myriad of settings and a myriad of combinations of settings. But for Mac gamers that are interested in this, there's really only 2 settings you need. So as you said, the for this Mac custom profile is extremely cleverly designed because it gives you, the developers have preset what they think will run best on the Mac hardware that you're running the game on at that particular moment. So it already knows what the best settings should be, although it is limited. So they do put a limit on the lower end Macs of 30 frames per second. But all you need to do is move that slider up and change it to 60 to give it more room to maneuver. And then just turn VSync off. So with those 2 settings, all you need to do is choose the for this Mac option, then turn off the frame limiter so it's not limited to 30 frames per second anymore, and then turn off VSync. Then play it like that, and you'll get the best frames per second, the best gaming experience for that Mac.
Yeah. And that is actually one of the things I really loved about this particular article, this follow-up article on Tech Radar, is that he has these beautiful charts, as I mentioned, and he shows what each bar within that chart represents to achieve the frames per second that he achieved. And yes, it may have a for this Mac setting, but as he points out, and you just pointed out, you can override that. And those overrides that you do will in some cases, as he found, result in spectacularly bad performance or spectacularly good performance based on what you're tweaking. So yeah, definitely, start with for this Mac and then go from there. If doing anything but playing the game matters to you. I think for the vast majority of people who are going to download and install this game on their Mac, they just want to play it. They just want to play it. And
absolutely.
if it plays well, they're going to be happy. And that's how I would be. I'm not going to sit there tweaking all these settings. That's bonkers.
No, exactly. That's why I say that there's only 2 settings really you need to tweak. But people seem to dive into loads of settings and different combinations to try to get the best out of it. But there's only really 2 settings you need to change to get a good result. Yeah. So on an M3 Ultra, I did see another person do a test, and they did the same thing. They just chose for this Mac and then turned the frame limiter off, and they turned VSync off. Just those 2 settings, and they achieved 87 frames per second. So rather than the 60 target, that then moves you up to the next level, and that's quite close to the default RTX scores of about 91 frames per second. So you got 81 frames on the Mac side, admittedly the highest, most expensive Mac you could buy, but that equates to this similar result of 91 frames per second on a RTX card, a mid-range RTX card. Because the RTX can go a bit higher than that.
Yep. Anything else to add to this story before we move on to the next one?
No, I think we murdered that one.
Pretty much murdered that one. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so my next story is kind of an interesting one. I suppose this may find its way to an essential app one of these days. Maybe, maybe. But there is a new app out there for the Mac called Substage. And what Substage does is it allows you to type out file management tasks on the Mac in plain English. Certainly
Okay.
an interesting concept. But as I started to read about it, I had to wonder if it can possibly overtake the muscle memory that we've built up using the Finder all these years. But let's talk about what it does, because this is very, very interesting. Once you have Substage running on your Mac, it can be found at the bottom of every single Finder window, and it's just waiting for you to give it commands to rename files, move files, convert to new file formats, create zip or tar archives. And you can do all of this by asking it to, and I'll just use the example given in the article that I'll link to in the show notes. You can ask it to, for example, create a zip file for every file within a folder that references pancakes. And I guess it shouldn't surprise anyone that it does all of this using a large language model to create these commands. Now, you shouldn't worry that it will suddenly wipe the contents of your Mac's drive. Instead, what happens, and this is actually quite clever, is Substage's AI is going to interpret the command that you give it, that you type in natural language wording. It's going to interpret that command, and then it's going to present it to you as a terminal command and ask you to review it prior to running it. And I guess my only tip there is if you see rm-r star, the answer should be no. No, do not run this command. But that's the key to the success, or maybe the lack thereof, of Substage. To get the most of it, you need to already understand terminal commands. You need to understand terminal command structure. You need to understand what's safe to type in. And you need to understand what's not safe to type in. Because if you don't, and you give Substage permission to go wild by just saying yes to whatever pops up, you're going to hope that the latest Time Machine backup worked on your Mac. Now, there is without Substage installed at all, there is a ton of power in the Mac's command line, and understanding even a fraction of what you can do. And I know there are folks out there who understand every single nuance of the command line and are amazing keyboard jockeys. But if you can understand even a fraction of what you can do, it can actually make you feel like a superhero as you whip out these complex commands to perform tasks like converting an MOV file to an MP3 file. Now, should we trust an AI to do this for us?
Yes, that's the question.
Maybe. And if you're paying attention to the commands and you're figuring out what they do, then I think this can also be an amazing learning tool. But would I blindly trust Substage to interpret my written instructions into something that's 100% safe? Let me try that again. 100% safe to run?
100% safe. Yes, absolutely. Definitely not.
I wouldn't bet my Mac on it. But if you are interested, I'm going to link to this article. It's actually at wired.com. I will admit it is behind a paywall. I am a Wired subscriber, so I could read it. But I will also link directly to the Substage website where you can check it out. I did notice that it is also available on SetApp. So if you are a SetApp subscriber, you can give it a try there. But you can also download it directly from the developer. And if you decide to keep it, if it's something that you really do like and you're finding a lot of value in it, it's a $4 a month subscription. I guess that's to cover the cost of the AI. Or I believe I saw that there's also a flat rate. And of course, like I said, it's on SetApp. So you can give it a try if you want to. Just be careful. If you use something like this and it pops up a terminal command, and you don't understand what it's saying, honestly, don't
Don't
follow
press
through with
yes.
it. Don't follow through with it, because you want to
Yeah.
make sure that what it's about to perform is going to be safe for you and your files. But I thought it was a really interesting story, a natural language finder for your Mac. And I kind of envisioned, as I was reading the story and reading up on what Substage did, that perhaps someday Apple may find themselves acquiring a company like this, or maybe this company, and maybe that's their hope, and building something like this into the Mac as a native feature, because it could be useful. It could be useful.
Yeah.
So that's it. Natural language finder on the Mac, Substage.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to mention that that sounds very much like one of the functions of, uh, as they say, agentic AI. So not just using an LLM to parse commands, but actually have your AI, well, whichever AI you choose, take control of your computer on your behalf to do things, including file operations and so on. So agentic AI sounds like just a follow-on of what this is touching on as well. And we may find that this sort of thing ends up part of future operating systems down the road, as you say.
Oh, and I did just clarify, I looked it up just now as I was talking here. If you run your own large language model on your local machine, or if you already have an API key for an AI model that you use all the time, then it's a one-time fee of $30. So it's $4 a month to use it after the trial, or if you are, if you already have a large language model installed locally, or you subscribe to a different service, then it's just $30 flat for Substage to get that installed on your Mac. So there you go. There you go. What is your next story, Darren?
Well, mine is potentially controversial. There's two aspects to what is currently going on in the UK at the moment. We have a bill that's been passed. I believe we call it a bill as well as you guys in a way. We can call it the same thing, which is now requiring age verification on a lot of sites and a lot of things that adults would normally dive into at some stage. Yes, age verification, it's become a big thing. It's only sort of happened sort of today/yesterday, so it's very, very recent. So I think it's possibly going to catch a lot of people off guard, a lot of people by surprise when they discover what they've actually passed in a bill and what it actually means in practice, because I don't think they often do know what they've agreed to. And I was worried when I first read about this bill. I didn't think it was going to go very far, although it has actually passed. So it's actually happened now, which is quite scary in a way. Because I was hoping that it wouldn't be implemented in the way they had suggested. And it looks like they have done it entirely the wrong way, which means that now age verification is done on a per site, per item basis, with lots of different companies trying to verify ages in lots of different methods and lots of different ways. And your age verification data is stored in lots of different companies' little databases and so on, and it's ripe for attack and data breaches and all sorts of nefarious, horrendous things to happen. So I haven't verified my age with any of these services yet until I discover quite who's behind the age verification implementation, because like I say, everyone's implementing their own, and they're all partnering with different companies doing different ways of verifying your age. So it's all, I'm afraid, a complete mess, completely as predicted by when we first learned about what the bill would actually mean in practice. We thought that if it was implemented in this way, it would be effectively a disaster zone. And that's what we've got as of today.
Yeah. And I believe, a big part of the issue is, as you pointed out, privacy. In order to
Yeah.
verify your age, you're uploading identification of some sort to verify you are who you are and you are the age that you say you are. And that information is being, at the very least, scanned and potentially stored somewhere where we may not want it to be stored. And those storage locations are, as you said, ripe for hacking. And with so many different companies out there attempting to stick their toe in the water of this age verification pool, we just don't know who we're working with any given site that is asking for this verification. And I believe you said in an email that you sent me that Reddit is already asking for this verification.
Yep. Yep.
Why? What is the standard? What is the, this isn't just to prevent children from visiting adult sites. What is the criteria for when a site has to present this type of verification? Do you know? Have they said?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's various criteria. I mean, it's as you say, it's not just adult site content, which is, although that is one of the main parts of the bill, to prevent people who shouldn't have access to adult sites from being of an age where they are legally able to. And that's always been a problem, which is true. But this approach to solving the issue isn't really solving the issue, because anyone who wants to get around it can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Although there's definitely some, oh, sorry, I got a cough coming on, cough situation. Oh, back to normal now. Yes, so the downside is what people will do to get around it. And I'm sure, well, that's one of the downsides. That's the problem is there are plenty of downsides that you could argue will be the consequence of this. But one of the downsides is that the first thing many people might reach for is a VPN. Mm-hmm. Which isn't a problem in itself. That's actually legitimate, perfectly fine, legitimate, use of a VPN to access content. The only problem is many people, I'm sure, will not want to pay for a VPN, which is what you should do, because your entire trust of everything you visit, including all of your financial situation, everything, it goes through your provider. So unless you entirely trust your provider, i.e. your VPN provider, you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. So in order to get around the problems of your private data being stored on a myriad of services for how long, so some of them say they hold on to your data for no time at all and it's instantly deleted after you're verified. Some of them say they hold on to the data for a while. Some say, oh, we retain this for 10 days. And I'm like, well, why? Well, why do you need to keep that for 10 days? There's an opportunity for a problem there. But those wanting to get around it and reach for a VPN, I think many people will be tempted to use a free VPN, and often the free VPNs are bad in themselves, in that they siphon off all your data. They try to inject code into your browsing to put ads in where there weren't ads before, that then pass on to the VPN owner instead of the provider of the page. So ad injection. There's data privacy issues, and some VPNs even pay for themselves by taking all of your data and selling it on to data miners and so on.
Sure.
So this potentially trying to solve the issue of being able to access sites at a particular age. But it's not just adult sites. It's in fact, Reddit says in order for you, or no, it's not Reddit, it's Blue Sky actually. They say in order for you to DM someone, you have to be an adult. So in that case, it's not adult content as such, although that's part of it. It's like just to enable the ability for you to DM someone. And that makes it difficult. Say, for instance, I've recently bought a rather nice skillet. And say I wanted to complain, and I go onto Blue Sky or Twitter, for instance, or X Twitter as it's now called, in order to complain to the company about something if something was not quite right, I'm not allowed to, because I haven't verified that I'm an adult and I'm allowed to DM them. So just sending a direct message to someone is now deemed adults only, almost, in a way. So it's all getting to be rather a spider's web of a mess to try and climb out of. And I think many people will be tempted, rather than to actually go through all of these separate verification sites and services, that they'll be tempted to just jump on the first free VPN that they can find, and they might find themselves in trouble. Some of the free VPNs run in countries with their own laws, for instance, their own privacy laws that don't count here. So there's all sorts of trouble in store potentially. I just think they've gone round implementing this in entirely the wrong way, and there are better ways to implement it.
Well, of course they are. It was implemented by lawmakers, and their understanding of computers, they may think the floppy disk is the height of technology. So in some cases they do. Yes, VPNs, paid or not, the Tor browser, there are, we're not encouraging people to bypass the laws, but there are ways to do it. And let's be honest, kids who are attempting to visit these sites are most likely savvy enough to know the techniques to bypass it anyway.
Absolutely.
But the whole issue of uploading an ID, whether it's a state driver's license or other form of identification that's issued by the government, is one that I've dealt with recently, because I was on LinkedIn, and they want you to verify your account. And how do you verify your account? You scan and upload your state ID to them. And guess what? It's not LinkedIn, aka Microsoft, that gets this data and verifies it. It's a third party
company
that gets this data and verifies it. And
absolutely,
as soon as I saw that, I said, you know what? I don't think Microsoft or this third party need to see my state issued ID. I'm going to live with an unverified account. Thank you very much. It's just not something I care to do. And certainly I would never upload an ID to Twitter. Good gracious. Who knows what's going to happen to it there?
I mean, that's the thing.
Or
who
Facebook.
Do you trust?
Who do you trust? So who do you trust? I mean, and if we can't trust some of the largest tech companies that are out there, how can we trust all the little rinky-dink companies that are out there like these that we've never heard of, who want us to send them our identification and verify our age? So yeah, it is definitely a mess. And interestingly, Brian has a good point here too. Let me pull this up here real quick. He says, personally, I think if we functioned without having to have age verification for years in the internet age, what overwhelming reason should we have? What reason should we have now to do it? To save the children, Brian. It's to save the children.
Think of the children.
Think of the children. That's exactly right.
I mean, to be honest, we do need some sort of protections in there to protect minors, definitely.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that.
This is not the way to do it, I don't think, because instead of we now put the onus on everyone to prove who they are. Yeah. Through various third-party companies that who knows who they are, who knows who your favorite provider has partnered with to provide verification services. And now there's a massive lucrative area in software development now for verification services. Yeah. So all you need to do now is start up a verification company and float yourself on the stock exchange, and you're instantly worth millions.
The next
and who's to know if you're
idea.
any good at it or not? Oh, business idea. Oh, yes, indeed. Yes. I never thought of it like that.
Well,
but that's the thing. We have to know what we're doing. I mean, if we start a company like that, we would have to really, really know how to do this properly without losing data, hemorrhaging data out of a database. all sorts of problems that could occur, being daily attacked, all sorts of things.
Wait a minute.
It's awful.
Wait a minute, Darren. You're saying all that as someone who has integrity. You're assuming that these companies that are starting up are going to be just as concerned about all that as you are.
Oh,
and
indeed, that's the danger.
I question whether that's the case. But clearly, this is a new story.
It's opened a can of worms. I knew it was going to open a massive can of worms, and it did.
Yeah, it's a new story. It's an ongoing story. It's something that's going to come up again and again and again throughout the coming years. So no doubt we'll be touching on it again at some point in the future.
Yes, indeed.
I have something a little bit more fun to share with you.
Yay!
Honestly, I'm not really sure what to say about this next story other than, holy cow, this is freaking cool. When I came across an article about the website Frame of Preference, I had to be careful to say that right, Frame of Preference, I thought, oh, okay, this is neat. It's a website that covers the history of the Mac settings visually with a little commentary sprinkled throughout. And you know what? I absolutely love reading up on Mac history. As I read the article, though, I was struck by all these little orange boxes that were interspersed throughout the page. It was almost like something wasn't loading right, but, I got the gist. I'm like, okay, little orange boxes, whatever. I know what's going on. In fact, those little boxes didn't even really affect the article at all. Plus, I loved all the pictures. They had pictures of classic Macs, those early iMacs, that amazing Mac Portable. I actually remember playing with that Mac Portable in a demo room at some conference. I don't know where I was. But, I mean, when I saw that you could swap the keyboard and the trackball based on whether you were right or left-handed, my mind was blown. That was amazing. But back to the site. Okay, so Frame of Preference takes a look back at the history of the Mac's control panel, system preferences, settings, whatever you call it, as it continued to progress throughout the Mac's lifetime. The name has changed, but it starts looking at this with the beginning, back in 1984, with the original control panel that was put together by Susan Kerr, including
genius.
And this is amazing. I love this early control panel feature, the ability to waggle your mouse around to create your own custom desktop pattern. That was just so cool, and they talk about that. Now, they also highlight some of the early innovations like sliders and steppers, cursor customization, and a whole lot more. It's a really nice peek at the early way to personalize our Macs. But then we move on to 1986, 1987 with a refreshed sidebar, improved accessibility, and features that still exist today, even if they're known as a different name, like Close View. Then we move into the 90s and the introduction of color to the Mac. Amazing color on the Mac, right?
Blown, yeah.
Well, that also brought color to the control panel. And it also brought other new features like monitors and general controls and easy access. 1994 saw the introduction of a introduction of, what was it? I can't remember what it's called. I know, I know what I was going to say. All right, I was saying purchased. I know why I was saying purchased. Because it was a feature that was purchased and integrated into the macOS, which was a clock in the upper right corner.
Really? You had to buy the clock?
No. Apple purchased the company that made the clock, and they integrated it into the operating system. Yes.
Oh, so that's the first Sherlocking.
That's right. The first Sherlocking. Probably before Sherlock, right? I don't know. We also
Before
saw the
Sherlock,
introduction of
wow.
window shade, desktop patterns, stickies. Stickies are still around today.
Yeah. Still a thing.
Interestingly, 1997 also brought some features that felt very familiar if you used Windows 95. Yeah, Apple wasn't exactly at its best at this time, and aping features of their closest competitor probably seemed like a good idea. But we also got the control strip. And, the control strip still kind of lives on in the Mac in the guise of the menu bar icons in the top right of the screen. So, there you go. Now, the return of Steve Jobs didn't immediately bring relief on the software side, but it did give us the iMac. But it also brought sounds with every little interaction on the Mac. 2001 brought us OS X and system preferences, which only recently we lost it by name. It's now system settings, but system preferences, as well as several new ways to personalize our Mac. And a dock. It also brought the dock. Now, interestingly, the site also takes a bit of a detour at this point because it bounces back to the Next and its customization features, if only to show a more or less direct lineage to OS X as we start to see in 2001 and 2003 and the Aquafied edition of OS X. Now, trust me, you have to trust me, I'm building to something here. Remember a moment ago?
You're building to liquid glass now, aren't you?
Remember a moment ago I talked about those orange boxes? Remember all the cool historical photos of the Mac throughout history and photos of the interfaces I talked about? Well, what if I told you that each step along the timeline isn't just accompanied by a photo of the Mac and a photo of its interface, but a fully interactive, emulated version of that edition of macOS that's being discussed?
Fabulous.
And what if I told you that all those little orange boxes actually represented tasks that you could complete in those emulated versions of macOS?
That is genius.
So they are little markers throughout the text to indicate what you should try for yourself within those emulators. Yeah.
Wow.
So freaking cool. So, as the G4 iMac, for example, boots and you're presented with a desktop and you work your way through that particular Mac's interface and you try those elements for yourself, the little orange boxes actually get ticked to show that you completed that task.
That is so clever.
Amazing, clever, innovative.
How on earth did they do that?
Super cool. Now, I will admit, as I went through and I played with it, some of the emulators are a bit wonky and I suspect might work better in some browsers versus others. But the main takeaway here is this isn't just some history of the Mac setting site. This is a truly interactive, educational experience that is meant to bring you just a bit closer to the evolution of the Mac and the way we interact with it. Now, for that reason alone, I highly encourage everyone to visit Frame of Preference and try it for yourself. And a link for Frame of Preference will be in the show notes. So very cool. Yeah.
I'll definitely be diving into that myself because one of the things that I've never even seen or especially not touched is the Lisa. I'm fascinated by, i.e. that being the forerunner to the very earliest Macs released in, as you say, 1984. But
just
before
wait for my fun news. Wait for my fun news,
Lisa.
Darren.
Oh, there's fun news. Okay, yeah, that's the next one.
That might be
We're
the next one.
thinking along the same lines again, yeah.
Yeah. But before we get to fun news, did you have another story you wanted to share today?
Oh, there is one, and it's the UK government again.
But
in this case, it's not so bad. What's happened is the UK government have finally figured out that requesting Apple to remove encryption and allow people to not only be able to track what's going on for UK citizens, but also track through Apple everyone else in the world that uses Apple services, was never going to fly. So the UK government have finally backed down over their insistence on a backdoor being put into iCloud. And I think, again, as you alluded to earlier on, those in the government aren't entirely, or they don't have let's just say they don't have a good history of understanding anything to do with technology whatsoever. So they probably didn't understand the consequences if Apple were to be so crazy as to put a backdoor into iCloud itself, which would then affect the entire planet. So I think the UK government have finally understood the implications of this, and they've backed down, and they say, well, we're not going to ask Apple to do this anymore. So hooray.
Hooray. Until the next country decides to ask Apple to do it.
Until the next one tries to do the same thing, yeah. So
the process starts all over. Yeah. Oh, look at that. You got confetti.
Absolutely.
Very nice. Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good that they back down. It's also good that Apple has stood up against these types of requests in the past, and I hope will continue to stand up to them in the future. It's an evolving thing, and we'll have to see how firmly Apple stands by their convictions as time moves on. But I hope that as a company, they continue to stand by them and continue to stand by their users and protect our privacy as they've always claimed that they will do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, Apple is often a target for these sort of requests, but it's not just Apple. I mean, encryption effectively runs the world. We wouldn't be able to do any banking operations securely without it. We wouldn't be able to do any secure communications, anything requiring something important like that, moving money around or very, very important decisions happening across the world. None of it would be possible without secure communications and secure links to banks and so on. So literally, it's not just an Apple thing. It's not just the government requesting Apple to do something. It's the government requesting Apple to make a change so big that it would affect encryption around the entire planet for all services, potentially, or eventually. And then if you do that, then the whole monetary system of the world collapses. I mean, you've got bigger problems at that point. So we can't do without encryption. So I think it's just a key thing to, I know governments are very keen on having no encryption so that they can just find out whatever they want to find out. But then you open the floodgates to everything, and they need to realize what the implications are. So they need to know to be careful what they wish for, because it may become true.
And if I can add, Darren, not only is that a key thing, but it's an encryption key thing.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap up our news with a bit of fun news, and then we'll go on to some listener feedback and a question. Let's see. Yeah, we'll go on to listener feedback and a question, then we'll wrap up with my essential app that's not an app. In fun news, while on the topic of emulators, I've got this fun news story to wrap things up. We may have just a moment ago taken a few steps through the Mac's history, but one important interface evolution that led to the Mac that we know and love today was left out, and that's the Lisa. Now, I think it's safe to say that while many of us have heard of the Lisa, we may not have had the opportunity to actually try one. In fact, the closest that I ever got was about 5 feet away in my high school library, where there were 2 Lisas, and the only folks who could use them were the teachers. So I got about as close as 5 feet, and then, security came in and ushered me away. But they were expensive computers. They don't want the kids touching them,
Absolutely.
But if you ever wanted to give one a try, this next, no pun intended, this next site may actually be your best chance. self-described as inspired by the Lisa Office system. The website LisaGUI, that's Lisa, G-U-I, lisagui.com, gives us an opportunity to visit Apple's original GUI within your browser. Now, it's important to note that this is not an emulator, and it is not based on Lisa's source code. Instead, it is probably best described as a loving recreation, if you will, of the Lisa experience. And it's actually based entirely on historical information, screenshots, and various websites and related projects. So it won't be perfect. And it's made very clear that this is an alpha release that will contain bugs. But I am very excited to see how the site progresses, because it has been promised that more applications are going to be added to it as time goes on. Now, as you play with it, you're going to immediately notice that you've been given the option to install LisaGUI in your browser's local storage, or you can simply give it a go by clicking Try LisaGUI. The advantage of installing it is that any changes you make to the files or settings are actually going to be kept because they're in your browser's local storage. So that's actually very cool. And even if you're trying it out, I noticed that there's an app, an app you can run within the interface to install it once you've started working with it. And then there's also a handy way to restart the LisaGUI that wipes it of all changes and reloads it from scratch. Now, I will admit that right now there isn't a whole heck of a lot that you can do with LisaGUI, but there is an icon editor, there's a bounce demo, and there is a puzzle game. So, what more can you ask for? But I do think that the real treasure with this site is being able to see how much influence the Lisa had on the Mac.
Yes.
Up to and including the bulging wastebasket, it was called a wastebasket, when you toss your files away. And I should probably also mention that if you would like to explore the Lisa settings, going back to our previous story, if you'd like to explore Lisa's settings, the Preferences panel is just a click away. Now, before you do anything, don't make any assumptions about how the Lisa works. Absolutely be sure to open the file README first and, read it.
Read it.
Now, if you've been itching to give the Lisa a try, and I know, Darren, you just said a little while ago that you have, check it out with the link in this week's show notes. LisaGUI.com. Very cool.
Perfect.
Very cool site.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, what did you think about this week's news stories? If you have any feedback or would like to share a favorite story or two from the past week, drop me a line, Mike@ForMacEyesOnly, or leave a comment in the show notes for this episode, and we will share your comments here on the show. Next up, we got a little listener feedback, Darren, on our remote support episode. This is from Bruce in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, and he wrote, for remote support, another alternative that I'm sure you've tried is to use Zoom or FaceTime for a video call and then simply point the camera at the Mac or the iPad. And the same thing can be done if you're trying to get support for an iPhone by pointing the iPad at the iPhone or what have you. I have even set up the iPhone, he says, on a stand for longer sessions. You know what, Bruce? Easy solutions like this are often the best. And if I'm being honest, yes, I have actually tried this. And I've done that very thing, and it works well. Especially when you're in a situation where you need to see their phone. You're trying to explain what's going on, and that explanation is just not making it through for one reason or another. Sometimes being able to see it is the best course of action. And if you can simply point the phone to a camera and say, there, that icon that's purple and green and is shaped, in a circle and is in the top right of your screen, that may be enough just to get them to that next point in the discussion of helping them solve the problem. Generally, it works really, really well. As I said to Bruce in my reply, the biggest issue that I've run into is the person on the other end not keeping the camera steady. But that is where Bruce's suggestion of dropping the iPhone into a stand comes in. So what do you think? Have you done that, Darren? Have you used the camera on a phone or iPad or Mac to support
No,
another device?
no, I haven't.
You
I,
haven't?
I,
Really? You've never done that?
I've never done that.
Oh
No,
man,
it's all remote
I do
desktop.
that from time to time.
Wow. Um, I have been tempted in the past, especially because before iPhone remote control came out, um, which I've forgotten the name of again. Here we are. What's it called? iPhone mirroring. Before
iPhone
iPhone
mirroring,
mirroring
yeah.
came out, then the option just wasn't there to help someone with their iPhone. So in some cases, I would have been tempted to say, just point your phone at the camera.
Yeah, yeah, why not? It
Which
works.
would be valid. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you get
There
in
you go.
desperate need,
Yeah.
and oh, there you go. It's not on though. Let's see.
No, it's not. I'm not going to
What's
show
on
you my
mine?
phone screen, Darren.
No, I'm going to be brave. I'm going to show you my phone screen. There we are. There's what my phone screen looks like. Lovely setting
Mr.
with
Dark
the moon
Mode.
in the background. Oh yes, dark mode all the way. That's it. And big icons with no words underneath. I'm getting used to that mode. Yeah, so I haven't been tempted to try the hold it up to the camera because that's quite tricky. And of course now, as an addition to that, it's not on my Mac because mine's not new enough. But the newer iMacs, the M4 iMacs, and some other machines, I think possibly some of the laptops as well. They've got desk view mode in the camera now as well. So you can have two streams. You can have a video of yourself straight on, and you can also have, because the camera is such wide angle,
Right.
it's able to also show you a view of the desk. So you could put the phone in front of you, or maybe because iPhone mirroring doesn't support the iPad yet,
Right.
you could put an iPad in front of your iMac. The camera effectively is looking down, even though it looks like it can't possibly look down because of the angle. But this desk view mode is a possibility to help someone out with a problem on their iPad if they just place it in front of their iMac and turn on desk view mode.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And just a little side note there, Darren, I'm pretty sure my M1 iMac does have desk view. I'm pretty sure I thought I've enabled that. I don't know. I'm
I'll have to
bouncing
try that
around
one
from
day.
Mac to
We'll have
Mac.
to try that one day. Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. I'll have to try it again. I
supports it.
thought I had it there, but yeah, desk view is just another nice extension to Bruce's suggestion because it gives you the ability to see that device and not have to hold it up to the camera. You could just keep it on the desk and enable the desk view as long as your Mac supports it. So yeah, that's another great way to do it. But it is, like I said, it's an extension of what he suggested.
It's an option. It's an option.
And then having
and also the other thing I haven't
nice stand,
Yeah. And he brings up a good point and something else that I haven't tried. Although I was standardizing on FaceTime remote desktop control, I've not tried to do the similar thing through Zoom remote desktop sharing and control as well. So you can do that sort of thing through other services other than FaceTime are available.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would be interesting to try that actually, especially with say a Windows user to try a remote desktop session with them with the camera and a remote desktop control session, but through Zoom instead. That could be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Bruce had a question. Now, I'm going to start off by saying it's kind of long. I'll need to get through all of this. And I don't believe that either of us can necessarily provide very specific support to the hardware that he's asking about. But I do feel as if we can provide some general support, at least for the overarching problem that he's experiencing. So let me get through his question and then we can kind of talk about this for a moment and see what you think. And I actually have some real life experience with the very problem that he's having, but in a slightly different situation. So here's what he wrote. He says, I am doing some XB7 and pods troubleshooting. Now, I wasn't familiar with the XP7 in pods, but as I did a little research into that, I believe that is the equipment that Comcast slash Xfinity issues to their customers when you subscribe to their broadband service. I believe. That's what I found when I did some searching on it, but I wasn't familiar with that hardware specifically. But he continues, with pods, as you may know, the Wi-Fi cannot be split. I am trying NetSpot Pro to see if I can heat map the 2.4 gigahertz. And he asks, first, any experience with this? And that's where I have to say, no, I don't have any experience with that specifically. But here's what I do have some experience with. He continues, I have wire mesh in my exterior walls. They're stucco. So he's got, wire mesh lath behind the stucco. And he also has that in one interior wall. Lots of signal loss along the tri-pane exterior windows. Yeah, because that wire mesh, add a little commentary here, that wire mesh basically turns every room into its own little Faraday cage. It's crazy. Wi-Fi signals do not like to go through that. Okay, he continues, I have a simple setup of about... Okay, I'm hoping he's being facetious here or that there's a typo, but he says I have a simple setup of about 150 Internet devices, Internet of Things. Wise, Nest, Sanope, I'm not familiar with that one, Honeywell, Fujitsu, PowerView, Ratio, Bosch, Alexa, Google Home, Apple Home, Sonos, Sony, Xfinity TV, Philips Hue, Wire, Purple Air, Tempest, Smart Life, iPads, iPhones, MacBooks. Yeah, simple setup, Bruce. No, but that's true, right? We all end up with these situations where, literally right in front of me, how many different Wi-Fi devices do I have, each using its own protocol to communicate with either my Mac or my phone or just the network in general, including these Elgato lights that I have over here, the lights that are behind me, the light in the corner. All of these are using different technology to communicate on the network. And in every single case, you can't wire these devices. They have to be wireless. And that makes a situation like his, with all his little mini Faraday cages, a very problem-filled situation. Now, interesting challenge, he writes, with pods, as you need to wait until XP7 stabilizes. So I think, if I understand correctly, the XP7 is the primary router, or as they sometimes call it, the modem, but it is the router. It's the primary router, and then these pods tie into that to extend the network through the house. And it sounds as if they are backhauled via Wi-Fi. That's what it sounds like. However, let's see. He says you have to let the XP7 stabilize for at least a few hours and then restart or unplug the cams to get them to move to the XP7. Otherwise, they pop over to the lower 2.4, or otherwise low 2.4 gigahertz. Most devices are negligible bandwidth. Cams are mostly upload. Yep, that's true. I am on 1.5 gigahertz down, 100 up. 1.5 gigahertz down, gigabits per second down, and 100 up with Shaw, Rogers in Victoria, British Columbia. So Rogers must somehow be tied into Comcast or Xfinity, and I just don't know enough about that to know for sure. Because when I searched on these, they were listed as Xfinity devices, and that's Comcast. Only on at most 2 Apple devices concurrently, not doing too much most of the time. I have XP7, 3 pods, and storm ready. Oh, and then he says one of the pods is backhauled via Ethernet to get into into an addition past wire mesh. Yes. Okay. So clearly, as I commented as we were going through the question, I don't have any experience with this specific hardware, but I do have a bit of experience with this specific problem. In the community where my office is located, there is an old courthouse, and no longer used as a courthouse. It's used as a community center. There's a restaurant in it, et cetera, et cetera. One of the past restaurants located in that old courthouse was a client of mine. I knew I'd get that right eventually as I kept repeating the sentence over and over again. One of the restaurants in there was a client of mine, and the restaurant location within this old courthouse, which was built around 1850 or so, all of the rooms have this very situation. They're either stucco or plaster and metal lath, either plaster or stucco, one of the two, and the wire mesh behind it. And it's a mess. It was a real mess to try to get a Wi-Fi network installed in there that not only they could take advantage of as they walked from table to table with their little, handheld devices for taking payments and orders and things like that, but also for their customers to take advantage of. And what we ended up doing there was a mesh Wi-Fi network. And you'd say, well, how did the Wi-Fi network work, Mike, when it's mesh Wi-Fi and they're trying to talk to each other Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi signals aren't getting through all those, wire mesh plaster and lath walls? We backhauled them with Ethernet. So we had a primary router installed in their main office that was then connected to their internet provider. And from the primary router, we ran to a network switch, a gigabit network switch. And from that network switch, we ran physical Ethernet wiring from that switch to each location where we wanted a network access point to be located. And once we plugged the access point into those locations, the primary router could see them, and the network was then a mesh network, albeit a hardwired mesh network. And it sounds like that's kind of the direction you want to go. You've got these pods, you've got one backhauled via Ethernet to a location in the home, and I think the best way to get around the problem of the metal wire mesh stucco walls is to backhaul the network to all the rooms via Ethernet in order to provide not only the fastest connections, but the most stable connections. If one of the rooms is close enough, you might be able to backhaul via Wi-Fi, but it's probably not going to be a terribly stable or fast connection because of the interference in between the mesh access points and the primary router. I don't know if I would continue with the XP7 and pods that are provided to you by Rogers or Shaw. You might look at using their primary modem, aka router, that takes for freaking ever to boot up, as you said, that it needs to stabilize. Make that your primary access point to the outside world, sure, but then get your own mesh networking system and connect the primary node to your XP7, and then if you can at all, backhaul them to the other nodes of that mesh network from there. You will be, unless you go into the settings of their modem, their router, and you explicitly say, effectively punching a hole in the firewall and saying pass the outside internet directly to my internal router. Unless you do that, you're going to be in a situation where you are what they call double natted. In other words, two local private networks, one feeding off the other. In my experience, that's never been a problem. I've never had any issues doing that in, simple local private networks that I've set up in homes or small businesses. The double natting works fine. And it saves you a little bit of hassle, and it does add a little extra layer of security because your router, your modem by the service provider is and has a firewall in it. and then that is protecting your local internal network. You're not passing the live public network to your internal one directly. You've got that little extra firewall layer there. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's funny when, because I've got experience of a couple of those type situations. When you mentioned just a small number of IoT devices, as they're known, only 150. I mean, well, I mean,
Only 150.
Yeah, it is a nightmare. It's difficult when you've tied that in to your network, and often IoT devices only want to talk over 2.4 gigahertz. That's one of the things I've done here in my illustrious pad here. You guys would probably think of it as a condo. We just call it a flat here, so just a normal flat here, pretty much. But so I've only got one access point, so it's very, very simple to cover the whole area.
Right.
And so it's really easy, and we don't have Faraday cage walls or anything like that, so that's good. So the signal goes everywhere, so it's great. But I have had to split my networks SSIDs, because there's one thing that tends to happen with quite a few devices, is they're supposed to figure out which thing to hook onto, whether to hook onto a 5 gigahertz signal or a 2.5 gigahertz signal. But often they can make a mistake and they'll fail, and you'll end up with 5 gigahertz capable devices on your 2 gigahertz network, and vice versa. Or the other ones trying to get onto the 5 gigahertz network, and they can't because they don't support 5 gigahertz. So then they get stuck and they can't go anywhere. So in this particular setup, I've split them off so that I set all the IoT devices to only go on the 2.4 gigahertz network, and all the fast capable devices can be told to join the 5 gigahertz network only, so they never go onto the wrong network. And also, going on from that, you can set up a specific, not like a guest network as such as you would for a guest, but you could set up a further network purely for IoT devices. So you can say all of my home network stuff, devices often that want 2.4 gigahertz only, that they join their own network and they're not part of the main network then, which is quite nice, because sometimes you might buy a device and you're never sure who the parent company is and what they can see on the network if they go back through the device. There's all sorts of hacking incidences of areas where people have been hacked on their main network because their IoT devices are on the main network rather than on a segmented network, a special IoT device network. And so that's the first bit about splitting networks, which I think is quite useful, but now may be becoming less useful as devices get better at figuring out which band they can attach to. They make less mistakes now, perhaps. So maybe I don't need to do what I do anymore, but I've just got into the habit of having it set up like that. But also, coming to the other point of the question, was what do you do in the situation where you've got limited connectivity or a larger place? And I did have very good results, as you say, with the backhauling of Ethernet in a way, but I used an entirely different method. So this was in an old hotel, and it was grade 1 listed. With very thick walls, so we had issues with coverage issues, but also where the main network point came in to the building was not where we wanted the access points to be for coverage for the building. And because of the age of the building, obviously we couldn't do any changes to the building at all. Including moving where the internet effectively came into the building, so that was off the cards as well. So we were like, oh well, what do we do now? And I remembered a friend telling me about an option which usually a lot of people frown upon, which is power over
Mm,
Ethernet
yep.
over power. It's not power over Ethernet, is it? It's the other option, and normally that's a bit hit and miss. But a friend of mine told me about something that he used in the past, which had always been absolutely excellent. So there's a company called Devolo, and what they do is they do these power circuit. I'm not sure how it works in the States because things might be very different with your power supplies and so on, but they do power circuit Ethernet bridging essentially. So what we ended up doing was we put a Devolo station on the ground floor where the internet came in, and we put the Devolo receiver 3 floors up
Mm.
into almost into the roof almost for another access point. So we put the access point where we actually needed it to cover the whole building, and that worked really, really well. One of the benefits of the Devolo power side of things is they're originally designed for media streaming, but at very fast speeds, and also very, very um, what's the word? Um whereby the data you get is very steady. So you get a steady state data thing rather than often Wi-Fi going up and down all over the place. This is a very steady state data traveling. So it was originally designed for media streaming in a way. Over larger distances, but we hijacked its abilities to do that, but by moving the access point to where we wanted it in the house without having to make any structural changes or run any Ethernet anywhere, no holes in walls, no pulling through of cables. No, all we did is we plugged one box in at the bottom of the building and one box in at the top of the building and turned it on, and voila, we solved the entire problem of internet coverage for Wi-Fi for that particular building with one action and one plug. We did it all in like half a day.
That is a really, really clever solution, and that might actually work for Bruce here to use Powerline Ethernet. The only tricky thing is that sometimes it can cause you problems if the outlets are on different, like completely different circuits, like if they're in
Oh
different
yes,
fuse boxes even.
yes.
Then you might have a little trouble with it. But otherwise, yes, you're right. It can work pretty well, and it might be a solution for him rather than trying to figure out how to get Ethernet to every room. Use the
Yeah,
existing power lines to install a transmitter and receiver near the main modem, and then put your mesh network
that's
node
it.
on
Yeah.
the other end
So
of it.
you might be able to just get a free extender from your ISP for your provider,
Yeah.
and just as long as you can place that extender in a different place with a Devolo kit, you're golden. You're
Yep.
off to the races.
Yep. That's potentially a good
Potentially.
solution there. Working backwards, I just wanted to comment on two things. You mentioned specifically separating the 2.4 gigahertz from the 5 gigahertz networks, and that most routers will allow you to do that very, very easily, rather than sending out a signal and then waiting for the device to say, I want to connect to 2.4, I want to connect with 5, or and some devices will just say, just give me anything, which is what you were talking about. You can
That's it.
specifically
Yeah.
say, let's set up an SSD just for 2.4 gigahertz. Let's set up an
That's what I've
SSD
done.
just
Yeah.
for 5 gigahertz. And that's a very good solution because it keeps all of your devices. I don't know why I was stumbling over this so much earlier, but your Internet of Things devices, your IoT devices, it keeps all of your devices on the same private local network so that you can more easily communicate with them. Which brings up the point. Oh, but keeps them on the 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 um, the frequency that's going to work best for them, whether it's
That's
2.4
it. Yeah.
gigahertz
Yeah.
or 5 gigahertz. Yeah. So you you mentioned but didn't mention VLANs. In other words, separating out your network into two separate private local networks, one for your Internet of Things devices and one for the rest of your devices.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you raised a good point. What kind of information are these devices potentially? We have to say potentially, unless you know, what are these devices potentially gathering from my local network, and do I care? If you do care, you might want to set up two separate private networks, one for IoT and one for the rest of your devices. Not a bad idea.
Yeah. Depends how paranoid you're feeling at the time.
It is a little bit more of an advanced setup. And
Yes.
one issue that you may run into if you don't set it up quite right is now I've got my iPhone and the fancy dancy app running on my iPhone, and the iPhone's on my private network, the one that I want my devices on, and the Internet of Things devices are on the other private network. Can the two talk to each other? So
they've got to be able to talk through,
Right. You need to be able to pass that information through from one to the other. And so it is a little bit more of an advanced configuration. Unless that is a major concern for you, I'd say maybe just stick with the 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi network and the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi network and just keep everything on the same, I mean, 150 Internet of Things devices plus your regular devices, you're already pushing, the 256 devices that you can put on a private local network.
It's pushing the maximum, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's IP4, right? IP4, you're at 256. IP6, you can go more,
yes.
But then all your devices have to be IP6 as well. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But you're already pushing the limits there. But you're probably, upwards of, close to 200 total with your other devices, your Macs and your iPhones and iPads and all that kind of stuff. But
I've only got 3.
Yeah. And then the third thing I wanted to mention is just a little bit more of a comment, because when you were talking about that building with the thick walls, I remembered that I had a horrible flashback to this courthouse situation, and that not only was it the wire mesh, plaster lath walls, but there were also these incredibly, remember, it was the courthouse and jail for the county. So it had these incredibly thick exterior walls. And on top of that, there was also a room that was used partially by the restaurant, but there was also a room where the original jail cells, which were constructed out of these steel plates, was located. So that was also a problem. So all these things kind of contributed to the idea that, we're not going to try to wirelessly mesh this network. We're going to backhaul Ethernet to where we want the Wi-Fi access points to be and go from there. These are all great suggestions. And, I'm kind of liking your last one there, Darren, where maybe consider the Powerline Ethernet. Give it a try.
Yeah, I mean,
consider the Powerline Ethernet for those pods.
Solution.
And see if you can get them to where you need them to be so that you get a nice strong signal throughout the house. But I mean, when it boils right down to the core problem here, that wire mesh and the stucco walls, not good news. Not good news.
Not at all. No, in that building example, it did work out really well, because where the internet came into the building, and we put the initial, the main Devilo unit, we could then wire from that, because it's only a short distance, into all the kit that needed to be wired at the bottom of the building, but then separate out the Wi-Fi side of things and move that right up to the top of the building through the connection to over the power lines. So we ended up with a wired situation on the ground floor, where the internet came into the building, and then a wireless solution at the top floor, which then covered the rest of the rooms and everything else. So it worked out perfectly. So Devilo is a really good potential solution, and it's one of the better, not power over Ethernet. What do you call it? Ethernet over power.
Powerline Ethernet. Yeah, Powerline Ethernet.
Powerline Ethernet. That's the one. Yes, it's one of the better solutions for that.
PoE is different, but Powerline Ethernet.
Yeah, not PoE. It's not that one. It's the other one. Yeah.
You might be using PoE to power those cameras, but that's we're not going to
Oh,
start
that's
that
another
conversation now, Bruce. We're going to end it right here. But
We're already quite complicated.
we're already quite complicated, and obviously this type of solution requires a little bit more discussion. And it sounds to me like you're very comfortable pursuing some of these solutions yourself. But if you're not, seek out the help of a nice local independent tech shop, and see if you can sit down with them for an hour or so and just discuss your situation and see what kind of suggestions that they have too. Independent shops are great for that type of thing because they tend to think outside the box rather than just sticking with the solutions that are going to give them a little something something behind the scenes when they sell it to you. So there you go. There you go. I hope that helped, Bruce. I don't know if it helped, but write back and let me know what solution you ended up with, because I'd be really interested to know. Let's move on to our essential app this episode, Darren, and then we'll wrap things up. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm taking a little bit of a different route this episode because what I'm about to share isn't an app as such. Maybe you could think of it as the original app for sharing knowledge, but it's a book. And it's a book that I came across in my usual way. I was stumbling about the interwebs looking for info on something completely different, but boy, oh boy, is it a cool book. And so I wanted to share it with everyone, not, I guess, as an essential app, but as essential reading. The book is called The Secret History of Mac Gaming, Expanded Edition. And it is written by game historian and journalist Richard Moss. And this book pulls from roughly 80 interviews with influential figures from the early Mac gaming era, and then goes on to explore the Mac's place in history, and as the platform that influenced so many games that were yet to come. And it touches on some of the earliest influences on gaming and how those games embraced experimentation that led to new and different ways to think about what it means to play a game on a computer. And of course, that led to games like Myst, for example. Now, the book also features, or Seventh Guest, and some of those other really innovative games that we came across in the 90s. Now, the book also features guest chapters from one of the Mac's earliest game evangelists, Craig Fryer. It features a foreword by Seventh Guest co-creator Graham Devine, an icon gallery, which is really super cool, and it also features a ton more, and it's all wrapped in this gorgeous 1-bit blue and yellow 480-page hardcover with a color-keyed bookmark ribbon. Now, it's $42. $42, and at the time of recording, it was on sale for only $35. Now, the book is well deserving of a place on any Mac lover's bookshelf. It is published by Bitmap Books, and I hesitate to give you the link because once you visit their site, you're going to find yourself lost among all their titles, including one that I currently own that's called the Atari 2600/7800 Visual Compendium, and one that I've got in my cart. I know, it's dangerous, but there's one in my cart called the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, a Visual Compendium. And folks who know me probably quickly realize that it's the ZX Spectrum book that landed me on the site in the first place. So, check out The Secret History of Mac Gaming, Expanded Edition, with the link to Bitmap Books in this week's show notes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think you might have just cost me a little bit of money there.
I definitely cost me a little bit of money. The Atari Visual Compendium, I actually purchased.
Oh, nice.
I purchased that from Atari. I wasn't even aware of Bitmap Books at the time I purchased it. I thought it was something put out by Atari, and I bought it directly from them. But then I found out that Bitmap Books exists, and they are, oh my gosh, they are absolutely gorgeously bound. come in a slipcase. All these books, I should say ZX, the ZX Spectrum Visual Compendium.
ZX, wow.
the ZX Spectrum Visual Compendium comes not with one color-keyed bookmark ribbon, but what is it, 5? To represent all the colors from the rainbow on the Spectrum's case. It's so cool. Anyway, this particular book, which is the Secret History of Mac Gaming, just as gorgeous as all the others. And like I said, it definitely deserves to be on the bookshelf behind me right there. So check it out. Link in the show notes.
Wow. I know which websites I'll be going to.
Yep. And with that said, that is going to do it for this episode of For Mac OS Only. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Remember, I do love to get your letters, so if you have any comments about the show, a tip to share, a software or hardware problem with your Mac, you can leave your favorites in the comments of this week's show notes found at formacisonly.com, or you can drop me a line, mike@formacisonly.com. And do be sure to subscribe to the show's YouTube channel at youtube.com/FMEOTV. And you can click that little notification bell so you can find out when we are going live. You can join the chat room, and you can catch all the behind-the-scenes stuff that doesn't make the final cut of the show. Hey, Darren, what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
Yeah, no worries. If you want to email me on Darren@formacisonly.com, I'll be very interested to see what you have to say.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Thanks to Darren for joining me this episode. Stay subscribed, and we'll talk to you next time. And we got another nice comment here from Brian. I'm going to put that up here. So many great resources to check out from today's show. Going to have some fun on the emulator. Oh, yes, absolutely. You're going to have some fun on the emulator sites, Brian. When I realized what was going on there, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just such an incredibly cool site. I have to mention this on the show. And any one of these could have been fun news today, but that one in particular, yeah, I'm looking at these orange boxes. I'm like, man, what is not loading in my browser? What's going on? And then the emulators fired up, and I started clicking around, and I saw the boxes check, and I'm like, oh, I know what's happening.
Oh, I know what they're doing. Cool. Yeah, fabulous. Cool. Yeah. It's amazing what you can do, isn't it? Because a lot of these are pure JavaScript emulators, and to think you can emulate not just the OS in a way, but also going some other emulators I've played with, which is like the Spectrum emulators online. They're emulating at such a low level. They're emulating the chips and the hardware of the device and the OS, but purely in JavaScript.
Yeah, crazy.
It's a staggering. I think. Going back to one of the earlier episodes, we chatted about emulators, and we said that any programmer that does emulation, an emulation programmer, especially doing something as advanced as programming an entire retro system through JavaScript, is up there with the best coders on the planet.
And imagine what the developers of these early operating systems must think when they can see everything that they worked so hard to fit within 2K or 48K or whatever. Everything they worked so hard to fit within that. Well, I guess it was loaded from a ROM, but still, everything they worked so hard to fit within that tiny little space that they had to work with, now being emulated in a freaking web browser in 2025. It must be mind-blowing.
But not only that, but the little graphic favicon icon for the website probably takes up more space than the entire operating system of the computer plus their code.
It literally does. Those little favicons, they're usually 10 to 20K. 10 to 20K.
Yeah. I know, a whole 20K, yeah. I mean, the BBC Micro fitted the whole universe into a 20K.
We had 16K to work with on the ZX81, and we had 48K to work with on the Spectrum. That was it.
Know,
that was what we had to work with. It was crazy. And now we got, 10K for this favicon. That's insane. Before we say goodbye to the live stream, I just want to point out the frame of preference. If you look at the very top of their site, and I probably should have mentioned this in the show, they do give credit to the website infinitemac.org for the technology behind the frame of preference website. So the emulators that you see there are from the Infinite Mac.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, infinitemac.org. So you might check that out as well. And with that said, we're going to say goodbye to the live stream. I'm going to pop up the end card here, Darren. I'll be right back with you, okay?
Fabulous.
All right. Thanks, everyone in the chat room. Thanks, Brian, for chiming in this episode. And we will see you again soon. Bye, live stream.